All right. Hello, everybody out there on the ABC 15 Facebook page. 10 o'clock on this Friday morning. We are just about through another super busy week. We know some of you have already started remote learning at home. So many districts getting ready to go back in the next week and to kind of start that adventure as well. So certainly plenty to talk about here on the ABC 15 Facebook page. So we thank you so much for joining us. And please, give us some insight, give us your questions, your comments in the side there. Let us know what you want to talk about as well. So, of course, I've got Carla Navarrete here with me this morning. Always great to see her face since I don't get to see her or really anybody from work very often. But yeah, Carla, I mean, certainly plenty to talk about once again on this Friday morning. What are the big things that you're hearing right now?
There's a lot. Like you mentioned, the online learning that so many of our districts have gone to. We were up at Apache Junction earlier this week. We also spoke to an expert about homeschooling. Some parents are taking that as an option. And so teachers that may be leaving the classroom for the very first time, we're hearing about that. Teachers that have been in districts for a long time and maybe taking an early retirement. I've heard about those. And then we've got some cute pictures from, I know, one kiddo in Central Phoenix who's, her mom's got her room all decked out. But I want to hear from you about what Superintendent Hoffman had to say. I'm really wanting to hear your perspective on everything that she told you.
Yeah, so it was like a 35-minute conversation. So, we covered a lot, and we do have that entire interview. We did have to edit a little bit of it down, but pretty much, the whole thing, 30 plus minutes, is up on abc15.com. So we encourage people to go check that out so you can hear the whole conversation. Also, abc15.com/schools. That's where we're keeping all of our education-related content, so it's easy to find. We talked about a host of things, Carla. Right off the bat, I asked her to help me clarify some of the governor's executive order from last Thursday. For instance, I asked her about that August 17th date. What does that actually mean now, since it's essentially up to the districts to decide when they feel they can reopen for in-person instruction? She said the August 17th date is important for two reasons. One, she said that is when all schools are required to be offering some sort of in-person support services. We talked a lot about that, so I'll touch more on that in a moment. And she also said that is still the soonest that any district can open their campuses for traditional in-person instruction. So that August 17th date is still the earliest that can happen. The other thing that we talked about were the metrics. Everybody is waiting to see these metrics from the health department that are supposed to help districts make these decisions on when they can reopen. As of Wednesday, she hadn't seen the benchmarks yet. She said that she was expecting a draft of those benchmarks by the end of this week. And that what the health department is doing is they're pulling metrics from other states, models that other states have been using to decide how they're going to reopen schools, and they're using that to craft our plan here. She said a lot of the commonalities that she's seeing in the data they're pulling, things that we've already talked about, downward trend in case counts, downward trend in percent positivity, and quick turnaround time for those tests. I know that Lily Alta with the Republic yesterday at the governor's press conference asked him about the benchmarks. And he didn't really have a definitive answer on that. He just kind of said that there will be a menu of options for parents. So I think that that's something that a lot of the districts are still waiting for, is that, okay, if we're supposed to be making these decisions, where's the information to help us do that? And she also stressed the importance of the districts kind of teaming up with their county health departments. She acknowledged that educators should not be making these decisions alone, that they're not public health professionals. And so she's encouraging them to team up with their county health departments to work together on that. Also, during our town hall yesterday, just to stay on this topic of benchmarks and opening, we had three wonderful experts on. If you missed it, I encourage you to go and check it out, abc15.com/town hall. Really a great discussion about all of the things that are happening right now surrounding education. But we had Will Humble on from the Arizona Public Health Association. And, I asked him about these benchmarks. And, some people feel there should be a statewide type standard. There's some concern of, in a large county, can you really trust that, one area of the county is okay and another one isn't. How do you trust when you have people moving all over the county? And he actually said that you can't really do a statewide type mandate because you have rural schools. Like there are some areas in Globe, for instance, that have already told the Department of Education that they're going to open on August 17th with a hybrid model, and that they will be able to meet those CDC guidelines because they don't have as many students. They have larger area that they can utilize. So that situation is very different than, say, a Mesa Public Schools, where you've got high schools bursting at the seams already, and it's a lot more difficult. So he kind of reiterated that as far as he thinks that if the county health departments and districts work together, that they should be able to kind of narrow it down to that micro level to decide if it is truly safe in that community to open the schools up. So that was some encouraging news. And then also we had Chris Cotterman on from the Arizona School Board Association. And I asked him, there's really no accountability for districts at this point. I mean, the governing boards are the ones who are going to make this decision. And I even asked Superintendent Hoffman, I said, so are we basically just trusting that they're going to make the best decision? I mean, is there like an approval process? Do they have to submit anything so someone can sign off? And really, no. I mean, it's really up to the districts to make the decision. And then it's up to the governing boards to kind of police that decision. And so Chris was able to speak kind of on behalf of those school districts. And he said, yes, legally, there's nothing technically stopping a district from opening on August 17th, even if they don't meet all the guidelines. He said, however, and he did put a big asterisk on that, saying, we've been talking a lot about these waivers and about liability. And he said, it's very unlikely that a district would do that because of those liability concerns. So he said, is it possible? Yes. Obviously not advised. And he said as someone who works with the 240 plus governing boards and organizations running school districts, he said that would be very unlikely because of those liability concerns. So, but again, Carla, I mean, it's still kind of like you're trusting that the district or the charter or the school is going to make the best decision.
Well, and it's funny you mentioned that because I feel like I've become this little scavenger hunt of masking at schools, right? And I've kind of come to the same consensus that one school that we featured on our piece, let's see, today's Friday, that ran yesterday. And so that was mainly on ALA, the American Leadership Academy, and parents being told that they will have the option to decide whether or not their child can wear a mask. And that's what one parent was sharing with us. And, I did see in the executive order that it said, that Governor Ducey's executive order says that you must wear a mask, and schools and districts, charters and public schools must mandate mask wearing, whether that be a face shield or face mask. Mm-hmm. And then I went back to the ALA and I said, well, is this the law? Because they responded to my request for clarification saying that they were going to follow the law come August 17th. And I'm like, well, do you see the executive order as the law? And then I never heard anything back. Mm-hmm. So what I'm guessing, and I've gotten a couple of emails. In fact, I got an email from one of their teachers, anonymous email. And she said, I'm so glad you did the story. I'm worried. I'm immune compromised. And we had a reunion. We came back and we were all in one group. Nobody was wearing masks. And your piece was right on that they are not going to be enforcing this. And I thought, oh my gosh. And she said, what recourse do I have? And I said, I really think there isn't really any like policing agency that's going to come through the school and make sure that every kiddo is masked up when social distancing isn't possible. It's really going to be up to the individual district, really enforcing whatever mandates they create for that specific school. So, I mean, it gives me a little bit of anxiety just knowing that that's the way it is. But that's what I can tell you and it's from what you're hearing as well from the superintendent, that we are leaving these districts up to kind of self-police themselves when it comes to cases, when it comes to all of the CDC guidelines, whether or not they're going to be following them.
Right. And I did ask, just kind of in some casual conversation, before and after our interview, And they're always great about that. They're always open to answer our questions, and I always appreciate that when we're working with Superintendent Hoffman in her office. I said we get a lot of emails from people already saying, hey, teachers are back at my school and they're not wearing masks, or teachers are back and they're not distancing. I mean, there's a lot of reporting going on here. And I said, so what if parents roll up and kids aren't wearing masks? Or what if, who do they go to with that? And whose job is it to oversee that and mandate that this is happening? And they said, we are a local control state. And so technically those are the governing board's policies for that district. So it's up to the governing board to kind of police that. So, it's tough because they're dealing with a lot, school districts and governing boards. I do not envy them. But at the same time, because we are such a local control state, a lot of these decisions and the accountability for that falls on them, which I think, some districts would tell you is pretty overwhelming right now.
Well, and I'll bring up another point onto that. I had a friend, and I'm not going to mention her name. She's decided to take a year off. She was teaching here in Chandler, and she was worried about all of these things, right? Like, how enforceable will the mask mandate be? And she even said to me over the phone, she goes, Carla, I'm worried about, like, what if a child sneezes and I've got my little fan on, and that sneeze, he's not wearing a mask. Let's say we're in a situation where masks aren't being worn because we're just coming back from recess per se, and that stuff just blows right into my face or into my area. And she said, there's just too many unknowns. And so she made that difficult choice, Danielle, of putting her career on hold for a year. And she just said, I just feel like this is the best situation for my family and I. They are able to financially, but I know that that's not the case for a lot of our teachers. This is their career. This is how they pay their bills. And so I've got another teacher who went back. They went in Chandler. They went back to school. Teachers did on Wednesday. So they will be going online this coming Wednesday, but teachers are back in the classroom. And I've got a teacher friend of mine who's also got some health issues that she's been having to deal with. And I pray for her every night. I want her to be safe. I want her to be okay. But she's like, it's so hard. It's where we gather. Teachers are coming in and out of my classroom, preparing for the upcoming school year. And we, I know you were mentioning the teacher in that school district. I want to say it's Eastern Arizona, where we had, unfortunately, the sad situation with a teacher passing.
Yeah, Hayden Winkleman School District, a very small district. I think they have 500 students total, a very small district out in Eastern Arizona. That was where Kimberly Bird taught. She passed away over the summer from coronavirus. And she was team teaching an online course. So it was her and two other teachers sharing a classroom. The other two teachers also got coronavirus, and they have since recovered, thankfully. But, their superintendent back then said, we're following the guidelines. They're all wearing masks. They're sitting apart, and they still got it. Also, her family. I mean, we're talking at least half a dozen to a dozen of her family members had it as well. And then her brother actually passed away from it as well. And he was a teacher also out there in Eastern Arizona. He was a contract teacher, so basically like a long-term sub. Well, I happened to speak with the superintendent of that district just yesterday afternoon, and he said, in addition to those 3 cases earlier, they've now had 4 more employees test positive. So these are educators, maintenance, custodial, support staff, and 7 more employees are waiting on test results. So that's 11% of his staff. If you take the 7 people total who were diagnosed with coronavirus, the other 7 who are now waiting test results, that's 11% of his staff. And he said that some of the people who tested positive are asymptomatic. So, thankfully it looks like they're going to be fine. But he was really frustrated because he said, we're following the guidelines. We're being safe. And, he couldn't confirm if it was spreading on the actual campus. You don't know if they're contracting it actually on the school campus. But he just said he's frustrated. He's really concerned because, based on the governor's executive order, technically they're supposed to be opening up in some capacity to offer in-person supports for students. And he's really concerned about that because in his mind, he's like, A, how am I even going to get the school ready when half my staff is out? And B, how do I make sure that these kids are safe when our staff is coming down with it without schools here on campus or without students here on campus? So one thing I did find out in my conversation with Superintendent Hoffman, and I told him and I reached out to the Department of Ed to make sure they knew what was happening in the Hayden-Winkelman district. There is a waiver that districts can apply for if they're in a situation because of the community spread where it's too extreme or it's too dangerous to open their facilities for those in-person supports. So that's something that they would have to work with the county health department on. But there is a waiver out there in those extreme circumstances where they would not have to open if it was not safe to do so, and they wouldn't jeopardize any funding. So there is that. Obviously, they're hoping that that's a rare instance, but it is something that at least, that district may qualify for given their situation. And I saw on here, Amanda Rausch, this was about 10 minutes ago, Higley Unified started online remote learning on Monday, July 27th. We talked to a great family from Higley. She said there's nothing in place for kids with 504 IEP plans. Do other districts have plans for 504 and IEPs? From what we're seeing, a lot of the district plans do say that they're going to do their best to accommodate those kiddos with special needs and IEPs. But that's kind of been like a gray area, I feel like, in a lot of these reopening plans of, yes, we're going to get that to you, but we're not exactly sure what it's going to look like, how we're going to do it, or when it's going to get to you. And I know that is some of the intention behind that in-person support requirement that the governor put in his executive order, that ideally those kiddos who are in the most need of some of those specialized services, or if they have disabilities or they need some one-on-one type specialized support, that hopefully they can get that. But Carla, we've spoken about that quite a bit, in speaking with families of kids with special needs. They in particular are struggling during this time of remote learning.
Yeah, they definitely, it's not an easy situation for the parents, and I think for the schools. I know that another parent spoke with us on, Wednesday, and she said they're going to be busing her son over. She's in the Chandler Unified School District, and she's saying that she is getting not the normal amount of time, but they are getting a little bit less of time with that child. He's going to be bused, and so I think as the weeks progress, I think we're going to see a little bit more clarification, hopefully, from some of those districts, maybe like Higley, to implement a program for your child, for kids on IEPs and 504s. I know I've got 2 of them on IEPs and 504s, so I know and I feel your pain, and I know how hard and how frustrating it can be. I know I saw Valerie Serrano mention microschooling is a good option. More parents should look into pods. Valerie, thank you for saying that. I think that's one of my key lookouts for next week. We have a lady who I've been speaking with, and she's got a microschooling situation going on out in Buckeye. She's going to keep it down to under 10 kids. I think she's got a total of 4 or 5 up until this point. And I think, Danielle, you and I were talking about this, and I think education is really going to change for at least generations to come, at least, from here forward, where the typical, big school setting that we're so used to may not necessarily stay that way. We may see microschooling as a new wave of educating our kids because of the situation that we're in. And then I saw another comment. We're not going to be out of this. This came from a nurse or a nurse practitioner. I'm not sure which one, but she said, prepare for March 2021 to finally get back into the classroom. Made that, that's a health professional there that's giving us some really good insight as to what her perspective is. I certainly don't see my kids going back into the actual classroom. I want to say throughout the rest of this year. I was thinking maybe more like January when they go back into the classroom. Of course, we've got a immune compromised child here at home, and so many of you are in that same boat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it is this. It's this really difficult pull of the health and safety of students and staff and families, but also the critical community services that schools and school districts provide beyond just, and I don't say just because that's no light task, but beyond just the academic portion of schools. I know yesterday we received some comments from people wondering about the nutrition programs. Are those going to continue? And from everything we're seeing, in fact, Adam Waltz today is doing a story on this. From everything we're seeing, districts are going to at least be offering some sort of nutrition services during these closures. But it's so hard. There's the mental health aspect too of kids being isolated, and what does that do long term? Just to share a little anecdotally, we have a little neighborhood park, and early this morning, because my kids get up at 5:15, we took a little walk over there. We had our hand wipes and everything, and they played for a little bit. And there was another mom and her little 8-month-old, and when the kids saw each other, I mean, you could just tell they were like, oh, and it kind of occurred to us both, we were standing apart and talking to each other from a safe distance, but that they hadn't seen other kids in a while. And she said, my little one has not seen another kid that's like her size at all, in the past several months. And so there's that part of it too, of, what does that do to kids for the long term of them, right, being home or isolated. And, unfortunately, we've talked about this. Some of them are not in the best situations. So it's a hard situation. These are hard decisions, but in the end, they're very personal decisions. And so that's something that hopefully the districts will get the guidance they need to give parents the guidance they need so that they can make those very personal decisions for sure. And I wanted to ask you, I think, were you going to go to Treasures for Teachers this week?
I was supposed to be there Tuesday.
Okay.
But we ended up, because there was so much going on, we ended up postponing that for next week.
Okay.
Tuesday's a very busy day there, which is a good day for us to be there to get a teacher, maybe looking at supplies and things of that nature. Yeah. But we have education week this week, so I ended up postponing that. Yeah. Like I did the micro schooling story that I'm going to hopefully work on for the future. It's just, there's just so much going on, right? That, I'm picking here and there, it's everywhere. So speaking of the personal perspective, Danielle, I'll share with you just, not last night, the night before, my 9-year-old, she started crying, and her birthday's in January. And so life revolves around her birthday, at that age. And she just said to me, Mom, is coronavirus going to be here for my birthday? Or am I still going to have to worry about coronavirus on my birthday? And, it's just like, oh my gosh, how do I answer this question? Right. And I'm sure you parents can relate to that. And I said to her, I don't know the answer. That's not what mommy knows. All mommy knows is that we have to be careful. We have to wash our hands. When we go outside, we have to wear a mask. We have to make sure to keep our distance. And so, inside of me, I was like holding back the tears, of course, but in front of her, I just showed her just a very positive message, which was like being clean, being hygiene, and all of that good stuff. And one thing that I spoke with Rachel Coleman about, she was the Coalition for Responsible Homeschooling, and she mentioned this, and I thought, God, I've never thought of that. Creating a work environment that is resembling, not necessarily of school, because school is school, right? And home is home, but definitely giving them that space within the home and brightening it up, and maybe bringing, posters and a map or whatever it is that it's inviting, and it feels their space, and giving them an opportunity to bring their personality out. And so I honestly, I'm like, how did I not think of this? So I wanted to share with you, and if I may, I have a picture. I'm not going to share my screen just yet. Let's see if I can do this. I have a picture from a friend of mine who shared her daughter's cute little setup at home. Oh, where is she? There she is. And it's super, super inviting. This is a picture she took this morning. Let's see if I can share that picture. There we go. I'm going to go back here and share screen. Let's see if I can do this. Oh my goodness. Let's see. Here comes a moment of truth. Can Carla do this?
There we go. Okay.
Ah! That's not the right one.
Okay, well, I'll let you kind of tootle around on that for a second. And I'll just kind of reiterate what you were saying about the importance of creating that space for kids and for students, not necessarily to replicate school, but just something so they have their own area. In fact, we spoke with a family from Apache Junction who has their 4 boys, ages 5 to 17. All 4 of them are remote learning. And so they got like these really big folding tables that you would take to Costco. And they basically set them up in their living room. And all the boys sit in rows and they do their work. And then at the end of the school day, they take the tables down and they put them away. And that's like their way of saying, okay, school's over. Now we're transitioning back to home life. And I thought that was really an interesting reminder, because I know with us even working from home, it's really hard to have that boundary and that separation. And so even with a child having their own area or kind of a designated space, it kind of helps create that separation between home and school as well. And last night, actually, we ran a fun story on some teacher setups that we've seen. We shout out to all the teachers, of course, who are on this journey and navigating just an unprecedented new school year. We have to get that out there. But we showed all sorts of setups. We had teachers who were in their classrooms teaching. We saw a music teacher who had like this whole setup around him so that he could access his instruments and everything in class. I talked with a kindergarten teacher who turned her spare bedroom into kind of what her classroom looked like last year. It had this beautiful bright bulletin board behind her and all these movable parts, and so that she could keep things right next to her. And actually a teacher from Gilbert, a kindergarten teacher from Gilbert, sent me some video and pictures of her in her closet, because she has turned that space into her classroom. And it's really cute, because when you look at her straight on, like you would see in this square, she has some cute stuff behind her, some decorations, and then you turn and there's all of her clothes there. But she said, it's quiet in here. There's no distractions. I can do my thing. And so, shout out to all the teachers too, who are finding new ways to connect with their students. I can't imagine it's easy. And, we are supporting you and thinking of you, especially as we have so many more districts getting ready to go back this next week.
Well, and it's funny, I had a friend from Chandler share with me just the other day that she said, I don't want to mention her name, but she's got little kids. And so at her school, they're allowing those teachers who have young kids at home as well to either teach in their classroom or go home and teach from home, so that their kiddos who are working online are super. Wow, that's awesome that they're giving you that flexibility. She said, Carla, I want to be in my room, because she's like, I've got so many things that help me here. I've got all of my tools. And I said, oh my gosh, well, why don't you just take all of that home? And she goes, no, it's just, this is my classroom. Like, this is where my teaching comes out. And so she's having that hardship right there, trying to figure it out. Like, she wants to be home with 2 kids that are also going to do online, and she wants to be in her classroom. So she's taking some home, and she's taking some, leaving some stuff at school. But just talk about a change. I mean, for us, Danielle, we brought our computers home, and we're sitting in the living room. I'm sitting in the middle of my living room, doing and editing video along with cooking a meal. So tough time, but at the same time, it's great to see the creativity that people are coming up with.
Yes, 1,000%. I did see this comment come across from Kathy Hamilton. This was about 8 minutes ago. And I just want to make sure we address address this. Not that one, where she says sending teachers out into a highly communicable and deadly pandemic is complicated. Do you have any clue how impossible it will be to keep our children safe? Don't minimize what a huge undertaking this is. And I just wanted to make sure that we clear up if there was any sort of misconception. In no way are we trying to minimize what a huge undertaking this is for teachers, for school districts, for families, for students, for parents. These are life-changing decisions. And whether it's your livelihood that's on the line of, do you keep working or do you stay home because you have to, supervise your kids with their online learning? As a teacher, do you stay in the profession? Where do you teach from? These are huge decisions. And so in no way are we trying to minimize what is happening here, the situation our state is in. Something that was actually positive too that came out of yesterday's town hall in speaking with Will Humble from the Arizona Public Health Association. I asked him just, hey, can you just summarize where we're at as a state right now? I know that Katie and Garrett, they do an awesome job of breaking down those COVID numbers every afternoon here on the ABC 15 Facebook page, but just as kind of a summary of where we're at. And he said that overall, right now anyway, of course, with the testing lag, we're probably about 1 to 2 weeks behind in those results. But he said, as of right now, it looks like our numbers are going in the right direction. He said he feels like the trends that need to go down are going down. The hospital capacity is opening back up. More people are being discharged than are being admitted. So he did say that we are in a better place and that things seem to be going the right direction. One interesting comment he made, though, is he said he was concerned because if we open, this is him saying this, the Arizona Public Health Association, that he's concerned if we open bars and nightclubs and some of those other places that are closed right now, that our numbers will spike again and that will prevent us from being able to offer in-person instruction. So in his mind, he said he feels like the governor has to make a choice. Do we open bars and the clubs and gyms and things that are closed right now? Or do we keep those closed so that we can have a shot at in-person instruction in the near future? Because either way, Will was saying cases are going to spike when one of those things happens. Cases are going to go up because you'll have more people in an area. And so he said it's kind of like the governor has to make that decision of, does he want a shot at in-person instruction? If he does, he may have to keep other things closed. And he acknowledged, he said, these are really hard decisions. He said, but that's, in his opinion, is what could hinge in-person instruction, is what happens with those facilities and organizations that are closed right now. So that was kind of an interesting way to look at it.
Well, and so what do you think? Our kids pretty much been home. You were talking about your neighbor. Mm-hmm. Our kids, there we go. Now you can hear me. Our kids have been home this entire time, with the exception of essential workers, maybe nurses, doctors. What do you think is going to happen when schools open up? Do you think we're going to see a rise in cases? I mean, my gut tells me yes, like there's just no other way around it. But that's an interesting perspective about the bars and the clubs and the restaurants and all of that versus schools. Like, what a balancing act, right, is upon him for right now.
Right. Well, and it goes back to that community transmission, right? And that's what hopefully these benchmarks from the health department will help districts hone in on. What is the spread in my area right now? And are we able to reopen and welcome students and staff back to campus in a safe way, of course? I mean, I don't think anybody thinks there's any chance that come August 17th, schools are going to just completely open their doors with an in-person only option. I mean, everything that I'm seeing is even schools and charters that are now still saying, yeah, we plan to start on August 17th. They are giving that online option. You know, they might have some students online. They might be doing hybrid. They'll be distancing. So it won't be a free-for-all in that case. But, you know, it's hard to say what will happen with cases. I think you have to assume that there will be more cases when schools open, just because you'll have more people in an area. But one thing, too, that Will Humble mentioned was, you know, he said as far as mitigation plans, he said a district's mitigation plans are really important, obviously. How are they going to handle it if and when someone gets coronavirus? How are they going to distance? What safeguards are they going to put in place? But he said, in his opinion, that the most important part of those mitigation plans are the screening. He said it's important to do sanitization always. But he said all this stuff about bringing in new high-tech equipment to sanitize, he said that's really expensive, and that's not as important as when kids come to school. Do they have a cough? Do they have a fever? And when someone notices, hey, that kid or that teacher is coughing, there may be an issue. What do you have in place to isolate that person from the rest of the group? He said that right there is going to be critical to keeping the spread minimal in schools, is that screening and that action part right after it. He said the disinfecting and the sanitizing, yes, that's always important. Definitely can't hurt to have extra clean schools. But he said it's that initial part right there. Since everything they're seeing from the virus, is what he said, points to respiratory droplet spread. It's that initial screening. It's that mask wearing that's going to be your best bet to prevent a huge outbreak, kind of a thing. But again, districts are also waiting for more guidance on that from the state on what they do if and when someone gets coronavirus. So, it's tough.
Alicia, I want to point out Alicia at 10:32, about 5 minutes ago, she said, what repercussions will we face with their long-term health if the kids get sick? The mental repercussions if they get someone they love sick. And I think, Alicia, thank you for bringing that up. I think that is, am I on? Okay. And so they were talking about just the longevity, like those lifer people who have the symptoms for more than a month, for 2 months, or underlying issues that come about coronavirus, right? Mm-hmm. And so I worry about that too, Belisha, because we know that chicken pox turned into.
Okay, looks like we might be losing shingles
for the shingles. Oh, okay. Wait, just.
Okay, I think we might be losing Carla's signal a little bit here, but I want to piggyback off of what she said while we try to fix that side of this. So as to that question of the mental repercussions if they get sick or someone they love gets sick, I have been talking with districts quite a bit about the social emotional learning aspect of returning to schools. I know that it's called trauma sensitive instruction, and a lot of the districts are implementing this as they prepare to welcome students back to school, but also especially back to campus. And this was in the Arizona Department of Education roadmap to reopening schools. And essentially what trauma sensitive instruction or trauma sensitive teaching is you go into the school year, everybody involved on a campus, everyone involved in interacting with these kids comes from a place where they assume that these children have experienced some type of trauma. So if that trauma could be job loss in the home, that trauma could be someone they love getting sick, that trauma could be they've been in an abusive situation this whole time, that trauma could be they're hungry because they haven't been able to access as many meals as they would. So there's so much that could possibly be happening to these kids while they're away from school that the schools are preparing to approach possible behavior issues when those kids return from a lens of, okay, this is happening because this student has experienced some sort of trauma. And that changes how you interact with a child who's having some behavioral issues or some outbursts. Rather than a punitive approach, you come at it from a more empathetic approach, and you try to figure out what's fueling these behaviors. And so that's something I've seen in several districts, that social emotional learning component, that trauma sensitive instruction, that trauma sensitive teaching, to try and help with some of these issues that students may be facing while they're out of school, any regressions that they may have experienced, whether that's emotionally, whether that's academically. So not that will be easy by any means, but I know that the districts are talking about it. And that they are doing their best to have a plan in place, whether that's through social workers or counselors, to help families and help those kids once they do return to school. So yeah, lots of comments still coming in. Yep, August 3rd, a lot of kids go back to school. August 4th, August 5th. Next week, certainly a big week for those kiddos to return to remote learning. I know Mesa, the largest school district in the state, returns next week. I've seen some posts on here regarding Wi-Fi, hotspots, devices. I know there are several schools that are giving devices. Elio Pacheco's are some getting hotspots. It really depends on the district. Some districts are able to provide hotspots, devices. Some districts are helping parents access some financial help to receive faster internet at discounted rates, or to be able to just have internet. There are people who don't have internet. On Tuesday, we spoke with Chicanos por la Causa. They are very active in the community, and they serve students in the Murphy district, the Isaac district, and also Carl T. Hayden High School. And so those are districts where you're talking as many as 94% of families qualify for free or reduced lunch in those communities. And they said they have already identified 2,000 families that don't have devices. And so I know they are trying to get devices and hotspots to families. Someone reached out and said T-Mobile is doing some stuff here locally. I know the state has put some more money into funding for distance learning for devices. There's a technology task force meeting at the state level to try to get kiddos access and devices, but it's really difficult, especially in those remote areas. I mean, you've got spots out even on Navajo Nation where they barely have running water, let alone devices and solid internet to do remote learning. And so I would say if you need a device, first check with your district. And if they can't offer you one, then they should be able to point you to resources or organizations in the community that may be able to help you with that. Okay.
Danielle, I'm not sure if you can hear me. Are you able to see me? I've had a little bit of, oh, there we are. We're good. We're good. We're good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome back.
I'm like, wait, I think I'm back. Anyway,
go
for it.
Start to wrap this up a little bit. I think it's important to remember too that with Arizona starting school so early compared to the rest of the country, we're kind of the first ones to go for it here in the US, right? And a lot of people and states are looking at Arizona of what is going to happen there and what can we learn from that. We don't have the luxury of seeing other schools in the country open up, or some of our neighboring states open up to get that advice and that insight for us. So I think that adds a whole nother layer of pressure because we're the first ones kind of doing it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I know that, with schools opening up so early, so much of it has been moved up, but at the same time, it really doesn't, I don't know how to say this, but it's difficult to tell where we will be just because of the fact that we are so early on in experiencing all of this. And I gotta admit, we're a hotspot. So let's not forget that we are still in that hotspot status. We're one of those 21 states that, according to the CDC, we just have that higher infection rate per 100,000 people. So there is no right or wrong, right? Danielle, we've said this all along. I feel like, what one family may decide is not necessarily what another family may think it's right. And just being respectful of each other with that decision-making process. I think these next 2 weeks, I know my kids are going to do a virtual meet the teacher night, and we're going to do a virtual back to school. At my kids' school, they do a Peter Piper night. We're not going to Peter Piper, obviously, but we're picking up the pizza and bringing it home and doing all of those introductions online. For me, if I can, spread one message, I feel like my kids feed off of me. And so whatever message I convey and whatever positivity in this situation I convey, they really read off of me and they feel that off of me. So is it the best situation that I would have wanted? Absolutely not. Do I think distance learning is the way to go? Not necessarily, but it's what we've got. And I think we're going to have to make the best of it. And I'm going to be as supportive as I can be.
Yeah. Absolutely. And like you said, that's all we can do right now is kind of just accept this is the situation and how do we all make the best of it. And so, I know at ABC 15, we have been doing our best to make sure that you all have the most updated factual information. Make sure you go to abc15.com/schools. You can track your district reopening plans there. Have all of our education related content in one area. Also, if you've missed any of our virtual town halls, we've done 3 on education so far. Great information from great local community experts, abc15.com/town hall. We will continue to bring you coverage. I don't know when Carla and I will be back on Facebook Live. But, thank you all so much for joining us this week. And we know next week's a big one. We've got lots more districts starting remote learning. And so, again, we are going to do our best to make sure that you have the resources and the information that you and your family need to get safely back to school. So thank you so much again for joining us. And good luck for those of you starting next week. Keep us posted. All right.